You know, we go over the same material time and time and time again, but the religious never learn, do they? Mostly, they just don't care. We already know that. You can correct them, and 2 minutes later, they're repeating the same old lies over again. Why is that? Well, because they're just not that bright. So, let's go do some more of that coming up next. The religious fail miserably with pretty much everything that they ever try. It might make sense to them, but that's only because they already blindly believe that they're right. That just doesn't mean that they're right. And that's nowhere more true than the video that we're going to go take a look at today from a channel called LoveSpeaks. No, it's actually stupidity speaks. Stupidity screams from the mountaintops. So, can this guy prove that God is real in just 2 minutes? Start your stopwatches and let's see.
There are some people that don't believe certain behaviors are absolutely wrong or absolutely right. They would say morality is a matter of opinion or preference, and this is known as subjective morality.
And they'd be right. That happens to make a lot of people very, very sad. Well, too bad. You have to remember what's actually going on here, which a lot of people just don't want to do. Humans aren't special. We're just social animals. We make up rules to follow that tend to improve social cohesion, social bonding. I mean, the list is pretty long. And then, once those rules have become part of the social fabric, people start to assert that somehow they're just true. No, they're convenient and useful, nothing more. Nothing is inherently anything. And that hurts a lot of people's feelings because they have been raised with the belief that their social standards are automatically true, but that doesn't make them automatically true. If that's what you feel, too bad. That's not how it really works. Hopefully, this guy is going to be a little bit smarter than that, but I wouldn't be holding my breath.
For example, they would say torturing babies for fun is wrong for them, but because it's subjective, it may not be wrong for someone else.
There's that old religious canard again, right? So much for being original. See, here's the thing. Moral rules, they don't exist for individuals. They exist for societies. If you lived on a deserted island someplace by yourself, moral rules don't really mean a damn thing, do they? If society has decided that torturing babies for fun is wrong within that social group, then it is wrong for everybody within that social group. Hopefully, anyway, because we do know that societies don't actually work that way all the time. What you need to look at are social groups and compare and contrast them with other unrelated social groups to find out which one actually operates better. If you do that, you start to see just how different human social norms can actually be. In some places, a particular behavior or belief can be celebrated, while halfway around the world, it can be the subject of the death penalty. There is no real reason why one is more applicable than the other, and more often than not, religion, which is a completely irrational belief system, it tends to have a lot to do with it. Different religions have different views, based on nothing more than what they want to be true. We don't care about what anybody wants to be true, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, I'm sure.
But aren't things that are wrong actually wrong? For instance, when can racial discrimination ever be right?
But that's where he's going wrong. He is expecting there to be a single objective standard which everybody in the universe has to follow. And from every shred of evidence that we have, that is not how it works. He's looking for that singular, this is right for all eternity, and I don't even have to think about it again ever. Yeah, but that's not real. Because here's the thing. Right and wrong, I know people are not going to like this, but right and wrong don't matter. A lot of people balk at that, but too bad. There are cases where racial discrimination would be useful within a particular culture. If there is a racially monolithic culture that is being invaded by, say, another culture of a different racial group, then it would be absolutely healthy for that society to dislike or distrust people who look different than they do. It's a matter of cultural survival. Now, there's probably a limit to how far that's going to be useful, and it couldn't be done on a grand scale. But he, like a lot of people likely watching his video, they've been culturally indoctrinated from a very young age to think that racism is wrong all the time, full stop. But that's not necessarily the case. It's just a different cultural take on the same question. Different cultures have different views, and how much utility those views have depends on the circumstances in play. Cultures evolve and compete, just like everything else does. People need to stop pretending otherwise.
If I think racial discrimination is right, it's right for me regardless of what you think, according to this view.
Right and wrong are irrelevant, though. I mean, you hold that view, but it might be either beneficial or detrimental to your survival within your own particular cultural group. In most places in the US today, being an open racist is probably going to have some pretty negative ramifications. But if you go to, I don't know, maybe someplace deep in the Ozarks where everybody you know is white, then being racist might be the social norm for groups that are trying to maintain their particular subculture. Such a thing might be doing just fine in an area where there are no other cultures to compete against. And that's what this is actually all about. It's about cultural competition. If something else comes along and now people have to reconsider what they did before and why, then there's going to be a massive culture shock. What he's really doing here is saying, well, my culture is the best. Why? Because he likes it. Because that's what he's been indoctrinated into. But that doesn't make it true.
When is child rape ever okay?
I don't know. Ask the Muslims. Because in a lot of places, that is part of their culture. There was a news story not that long ago about a 9-year-old Christian girl, and I use some pretty big air quotes for that was kidnapped by Muslim fanatics and forcibly married off to an older Muslim man. In the courts, and I think it was in Pakistan, don't quote me, but I think it was, they said, nope, that's perfectly fine because that's part of their culture. Now, most of us would strongly disagree, and of course, that's our prerogative. But they can likewise just disagree with us. We can tell them that they're wrong, and they can turn around and say, we are. Who's right? Who's wrong? Neither, because right and wrong don't matter. In their culture, it's fine. In ours, it isn't. Since it's happening in their culture, there's really only so much we can do unless we choose to go to war over it. Might makes right doesn't really work in this case, does it?
If subjective morality is true, I may not like it, and you may not like it, but if the child rapist prefers to take advantage of children sexually, then it's right for them.
Like I said, this doesn't really work on an individual level, but on a cultural one. Some Catholic priests have sex with children. That's verifiable. The vast majority of them do live within cultures that don't permit that, though, which is why the Catholic Church is currently out more than $4 billion in the U.S. alone. The priests want to have sex with children, or at the very least, they don't have better options of acceptable sex partners. Therefore, the Catholic Church has made it a habit of hiding these pedophile priests and trying not to pay out as best they can, because they care more about the money than justice. They don't actually care. They're held accountable by the societies in which they exist, and they don't actually give a damn about being right or wrong. They just want to keep their money in their pockets, and they want to protect the people on their side.
So a big problem that occurs with this view is, let's say you say something is wrong to someone, but they believe it's right, or vice versa. Who's actually right?
Nobody. Because, like I keep saying, right and wrong are irrelevant, at least if you're talking about objective right and wrong. The whole idea is, whether you like it or not, entirely subjective. If you look at the law, which is often just the codification of morality, they don't talk about right and wrong. It's legal and illegal. If they cart you off for murdering somebody, it's not because murder is wrong, it's because murder is against the law. They're not really moral rules. It's a list. Here's what you can do. Here's what you can't do. If you do the things that you're not supposed to do, you get penalized. There you go.
If there is no objective standard to compare to, then neither of you are absolutely right, just subjectively right.
And neither of you are absolutely wrong, because there is no such thing as objective right or wrong. This just goes right back to indoctrination. Now, around here, childhood indoctrination tends to carry some pretty negative connotations. However, indoctrination is absolutely necessary in the lives of all children. You are indoctrinated into the language that the majority of people speak. You are indoctrinated into social customs. If you weren't, then you'd probably have a really miserable life, because most people in the culture that you live in, they wouldn't accept you. This is the social lube that makes societies function. And it works fine so long as people understand it for what it actually is. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't recognize it as useful, and they start to insist that it's actually objectively true. Well, everyone believes in a God. Yeah, that's clearly not true. However, when you get a specific group who believes in a specific God and who reject anybody who doesn't believe in their specific God, often violently, then you tend to have some problems. That's where cultural competition and evolution comes in. One side, whether you like it or not, is eventually going to lose.
And another way you could put it is, you can't tell me what I'm doing is wrong, and I can't tell you what you're doing is wrong.
Watch me. Now, there's a difference between me offering my own personal opinion on your actions and me saying that my views are absolutely correct, and if you don't follow my opinions, then you're wrong. I can call you an idiot for your beliefs all I want. You don't have to like it, because it doesn't really matter. That's when we get to the evidence and having rational intellectual discussions over the ramifications of people's actions and beliefs. And I'm sorry to say, people on the religious side, they don't tend to do very well in situations like that. I can tell you that you're wrong, and you can tell me that I am. I don't have to pay any attention to you, because your opinions carry no objective weight. Only the collective views of society do, and it depends on which of us, if either of us, they happen to agree with. This really isn't that hard.
Is this not bizarre? Aren't things actually right and actually wrong?
Nope. Well, not objectively anyhow. Just because the idea happens to really appeal to you on an emotional level, that doesn't mean that's how the world works. That's really where we have so many problems with so many people, religious and non-religious alike. They want the world to be a certain way. But that doesn't mean that it is, just that they really want it to be that way. They are comforted, believing that reality works as they wish that it did. Whether or not it actually does is entirely irrelevant, and I see this among theists and atheists alike. People in general are looking for comfort. I'm not. I'm looking for truth. As I usually say, the most comforting lie ever told is still a lie, and the most uncomfortable, terrifying truth that ever was, it is still the truth. Getting to the truth matters, no matter how it makes you feel. Grow up.
If you've agreed that things are absolutely right or absolutely wrong, like saying racial discrimination is absolutely wrong all the time, in any way, in every culture, regardless of opinion or preference,
then you are out of your mind. Saying, but that's not the world that I want to live in, doesn't matter. You live in the world that you live in, so there. Your feelings don't mean anything. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't try to improve the situation where possible, at least how you see it as an improvement. I mean, go ahead, please do. However, in order to see where things can be improved, you have to be aware of the actual state of factual reality. And people like this guy, they simply aren't. When you start with an entirely unrealistic expectation, you are not going to get anywhere useful. It's why you need to put your feelings aside and deal with what is actually real, not just what is emotionally comforting. Otherwise, you're just making a fool of yourself.
Or that torturing babies for fun is absolutely wrong all the time, in any way, in any culture, regardless of opinion or preference, then you might not have thought about this, but you're actually agreeing that God exists.
Nope. Of course, he's expecting everybody to agree with everything he just said because he, like most theists, can't imagine that everyone isn't just like he is. He sees himself and his desires in absolutely everything around him. That's what we call delusion. It's not dealing with the things as they actually are, but as he desperately wishes they could be. Now, I'm not saying that I think people ought to torture babies for fun or whatever silly thing they come up with. I wouldn't want to be around people who actually did that. I wouldn't want to live in a society where something like that was regularly practiced. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We know that there have been cultures that did practice child torture and child sacrifice, often for religious reasons. The people who lived in those cultures, they didn't think it was wrong, or they wouldn't have done it. Why is this something that he can't figure out?
How so, you might say? Consider this argument. Every law has a lawgiver.
Bullshit. Absolute, complete, utter bullshit. First off, what he's talking about, they aren't laws, they're feelings. Where actual laws exist, they were given by lawgivers. Human lawgivers. They were created by people for the express good and support of other people. There is no evidence at all for this idiot's imaginary friend. This is just an assertion, and assertions, like most of the crap that comes out of these people's mouths, they don't mean anything. It's just him going, but I really want to believe. Yeah, well, fuck you.
There is a moral law, like saying things are absolutely wrong or absolutely right.
And that's just another claim. Back it up, because that's really all these people can do. They claim that these things are real, just like they do with their imaginary friends. But that doesn't make any of it true. I don't care what you want to be true. Until you can provide testable, verifiable evidence for any of it that it actually is, you're completely full of shit. Knock it off.
Therefore, there is a moral lawgiver.
Well, since your premises are complete failures, so is your conclusion. Now, I'm sure he's going to say something like, and that's just God. Okay, back it up. Of course, he can't. He can just assert it based on faith. Faith doesn't mean anything. This is why I'm so critical of all the claims about gods. You're not showing the steps, how you got there. You're just pretending that it's got to be true because that's what you want to be true. But that's not how rationality works. It's how you make a complete fool of yourself, which is really all these people are doing. He hasn't proven premise 1, he just wants it to be so. He hasn't proven premise 2, he hasn't even tried, and the conclusion is laughably ridiculous. Put up or shut up, and these morons refuse to do either one.
Some of you might dispute that this lawgiver is God, but remember this. Only minds can make laws.
Nope, that's just another assertion. The physical laws of the universe didn't come about by any minds, at least not that any evidence that we have shows. I know he doesn't like that fact, but that doesn't matter, does it? Besides, he isn't even addressing the giant elephant in the room. How does he get from moral lawgiver to his specific God? Let's see your work. Of course, he doesn't have anything. He's just an imbecile. Maybe in the last couple seconds of his video he'll address that. I don't know, but I wouldn't be holding my breath. Let's see.
And what mind could instill this law into every human mind that exists and every human mind that's ever existed? God.
Oh, I don't know about that. Mankind has made up thousands of gods, perhaps millions in its history. Which one do you mean exactly? And remember, I'm going to expect you to back that up. Because this is the problem. It's all, but I really want it to be true. He has failed on absolutely every conceivable level, and that's actually quite a feat. Yet the religious are entirely blinded to their own failures because they just aren't interested in getting to the truth. They only want to have their childish egos stroked. They have something seriously wrong upstairs. So anyway, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. I have addressed a lot of these moral arguments over the years, and absolutely none of them get the religious anywhere. It's just pure assertion and religious assumption with no evidence anywhere to be found. But I really like it. Okay, so what? That means absolutely nothing. Your faith gets you nowhere. Your book doesn't mean anything. You are just idiots, and no matter how many times we have to point out that you're wrong, they just don't stop doing any of it, do they? I wonder why. All right, dumb shits. How could I forget?